Welcome to Push Go, a podcast powered by Plum, where we highlight the defining moments that impact how we live and work. Today, I'm joined by Isaac Rogers. Isaac is the former CEO of 2020 Research, and he's the current CSO at the Schlesinger Group, a marketing research company. Today, Isaac talks about the importance of networking and mentorship, and how saying yes to one lunch changed the trajectory of his career. I can't wait for you to hear more. Hey, welcome to the Push Go podcast. I have Isaac Rogers here in the building, sort of in the building, virtual. Welcome, Isaac.
Hey, Rick, nice to be here.
It's crazy that, COVID is basically over and we're still doing the Zoom thing, but you are in Nashville.
I'm in Nashville, that's right. Working for my home office. So I think March 16th, we sent everybody home and said, we'll see, a couple of weeks, we'll just let this thing blow over. And we really did it because most of the folks were having to, take care of kids where they were starting to send some of the schools home for a few days. And well, that was 2.5 years ago. So I'm still in my home office. So, but I'm back to traveling quite a bit and conferences and those kind of things. But yeah, it's still a home office for me.
Well, that's great. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about how we met in a second, but let's talk about the beginnings with Isaac. You're a Vandy guy, both undergrad and MBA. Right. So how did you end up at Vandy?
Well, it's funny. I was talking about this with my parents not too long ago. So, I was raised in a small town in Arkansas, and just knew that I wanted to, kind of get out and go do something different. And so I was looking at different schools on the East Coast, and Vandy wasn't on my radar, and it didn't have nearly the national notoriety 25, 30 years ago that it does now. And so on a whim, actually, we were on a road trip and we said, why don't we drive through and check out the campus? And I just absolutely fell in love with it, put in an application, and ended up going the next, or 2 years later, I think I did early admission, met my wife there about a year after that. And then, had no intention of really staying around Nashville. We'll kind of get to the story, but I was going to leave, and I'm getting dragged back to Nashville 2 or 3 times. So this there's like a magnet that keeps me coming back.
Wow. So you were living in Vandy before it was cool.
Before Nashville was cool. So Nashville was starting to get cool. A lot of people would be from all over the country going to Vandy undergrad, and they'd be kind of hanging around going, it's kind of cool around here. Like, it's got a great music scene and the culture is pretty cool. But it was still kind of a sleepier city. It wasn't a metropolitan area. Now you look around and sometimes it doesn't. I don't even know where I am. I literally can get lost in my own city. It's changing so much sometimes.
That's crazy. It's crazy. So when you were going undergrad, did you plan on staying for an MBA, or did you go out and come back in?
Went out, came back in. Rick, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I knew some of the things I didn't want to do. I really had some passions in undergrad, but they weren't going to lead me anywhere. I was huge into political science, film studies, lots of just kind of random things, and really had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And one of my college roommates called me up one day, and this was really early 2000s, about 2000. This would have been summer 2001 and he says, hey, my brother has this startup. Would you want to join it? And I said, sure.
Yeah. What's a startup?
He said, don't you want to know? Well, I said, don't you want to know what they do? And I was like, I don't really care. I was like, I want a job. So, my trajectory, I had no idea what I was going to do after undergrad. I was going to kind of, try a few different things. And then this opportunity kind of fell in my lap that kind of changed the course of my history in a really, really positive way. So, I'm one of those that kind of luckily fell into something that I love very early in my career, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. So you started out early on in kind of analytics, numbers, statistics, research. I mean, that was not everyone can kind of dip into that a little bit, but you weren't necessarily on the research route, but you were involved.
No.
So what got you even interested into this lane of research, analytics, statistics, big data?
Yeah. So between undergrad and grad school, I was part of a technology startup, and we did government transactions. It's a very niche industry, but I really loved it. It was great, and there were about 3 of us full time when I started, and we grew the company pretty quickly and had just a great time with it. Learned a lot of things to do and not to do with a technology business. Went back to grad school, and my idea was, I think I'm going to be a management consultant. I really liked that realm. We had been acquired a couple times and done some M&A, and kind of liked what those management consultants got to do. So that was kind of my path. And so I got a strategy and really marketing MBA when I went back the second time, or went back to Vandy the second time. And I had no intention of getting into research. I had spent some time, I was in strategy, finance, and marketing. Those are my concentrations. So I did a lot of finance, did a lot of strategy. So a lot of numbers, math, and then I spent a lot of time with statistics, actually. And I kind of like statistics. I don't know why. It was the first time I was exposed to it was in grad school, and I kind of loved it. But anyway, so the way I got into research was, and he doesn't mind that I tell this story, but so I had a couple job offers, and I was kind of weighing what my options were. So this was about November, December of 2007. Mm-hmm. And the head of marketing for Vanderbilt comes up to me, and she had become a friend through a project. Her name's Yvonne, and Yvonne said, "Isaac, I have a favor to ask of you." Said, you're a guy who's built technology companies, tech products. You spent, I don't know, 6 or 7 years doing that before grad school. I have a friend, his name is Jim Bryson, and he doesn't know what he's doing.
That's great.
And Jim wants to invest in this software that he thinks he can build. And, he's asked me what I think, and they're kind of, thinking that they really want to take a run at this. Jim has no idea what he's doing. Can you go to lunch with this Jim Bryson guy and talk him out of it? That was my mandate.
Talk him out of it.
To talk him out of it. And my one exposure to market research before that was, I'd been a product manager while I was in business school, kind of during for a summer project, and we'd done some focus groups, and so I'd gotten exposed to that. I did like.
Well, then research. Focus groups. Right?
That was it. We did a little bit. We did a couple surveys. It was a business intelligence software, so kind of had it was a very B2B focused set of quantitative and qualitative research, but it was literally like 3 days of focus groups, and I thought I was an expert. And so I said, Yvonne, I'll be happy to go sit down with Jim and tell him he's crazy. And I took a lunch with him, and instead of telling him he was crazy, I actually loved what he was trying to do, and so I joined him. But that's actually how I got in the research space. It had nothing to do with looking for research. It had more to do with looking for business problems to solve.
Yeah, well, I love the whole concept of relationships there. I mean, had you not only had that conversation, but said, yes, I'll take the lunch.
Yeah.
The bug would have never bitten you, or could have, in theory, never bitten you with research, which is crazy.
100% I would be in management consultant today, or I would have done that after graduate school. I would have never considered research. It was never on my radar at all. I'm eternally thankful and grateful for Yvonne making that connection, and I kind of rib her every time I see her. For me, it just reminds me and one of the things that I struggled with early on in my career, I'm doing some better, is making sure that you take that call, take that meeting, create that network. I was horrible at it at the beginning of my career, and I've seen the value of that over the last couple decades. And I think it's one of the things that I wish I could have done better earlier on, but I am sure glad I took that call.
So that's shocking to me, because we met around 2010, 2011 in that time frame at an event. And listen, you were the man. I mean, as far as networking and knowing people and getting involved, it's like, hey, have you talked to Isaac? Have you talked to Isaac? And so I know how this works, but it surprises me that isn't something that just naturally would be you, the networking, engaging, because that's very much who you are today.
Yeah, so it wasn't at all who I was, and I had a good friend in business school who was an awesome networker, and he taught me a lot of things. But I always felt like he can go do that. I have a different way. I was just never comfortable networking, and I got more comfortable fairly quickly. One thing is, this industry is really, really welcoming. I mean, Rick, you've been in this industry for about as long as I have, and people will take time to explain things to you, to meet you, to hear you out, to hear you. And so that's a piece of it. And I say this a lot, but this industry kind of loved me back. Like I found that the more effort I put in, not to growing my business or or, trying to sell something, but actually like trying to talk to another entrepreneur about what they were doing, talking to somebody who was a student graduating and wanting to join the market research industry. Every time I take time to do that, 9 times out of 10, the dividends on that time are just extraordinary. And it's funny, I have to keep reminding myself to do it because I'm sitting here saying it's one of the most valuable things that I ever do, period, but I still need to work on it because I still don't do it enough.
Well, listen, you poured into me early on into that space, and I don't want to lose that quote. That quote was very tweetable. It's a very tweetable quote, okay?
Oh, no.
From a mentorship, engagement, pouring in, when you give to an organization, you said, hey, that the industry loved me back.
That's right.
That's really cool, tweetable phrase. The industry loved me back, and it loved you back because you were serving and giving, and therefore you had the reciprocal. And I think that's it's not understood today. I don't think it's taught in practice the way it should be. It's all about me, and what can I do? But the giving back part, I mean, you look back over the legacy of the last decade or so that you poured into the industry, and that's why it wasn't tongue-in-cheek earlier. You really are known as a great networker, a great advocate for research. But that being said, I pumped you up enough. Everyone loves you now. Oh my God, Isaac's amazing. So we're going to slow down. You weren't always, the executive CEO running stuff guy. That wasn't because you had to get into this business. But we talked earlier about defining moments, and so what was kind of that moment where you knew, man, I'm in the lane. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take on the responsibility of being the guy. Yeah. And I'm going to go run something. So kind of walk me through how you got to be a CEO of, company A. We could go back to iModerate or 2020. We could hit either one of them. But how did you get to that level? Because not everyone can become a CEO of a very successful company and then get acquired and be another executive in another massive, company. Walk me through that.
So I think it's a good question. It's a hard one to answer because I don't think I ever intentionally set out and said I want to be the CEO of X, Y, or Z. What I always felt, my heart always told me I wanted to surround myself with an incredible team of people, get amazing things done, and solve big problems. That's not like some prepared notion that I have. Like, that's just how I feel about things. I want to solve problems, business problems, client problems. Like, just have a ravenous appetite for that. And I found, and I screwed this up a lot in my early career, and my colleagues could tell you that I wasn't great at this. I found that when I was given the opportunity to work around a talented team of motivated leaders, that my gift was really to help create a vision and lead them and kind of chart the path. And I was given an opportunity to do that early in my career in a couple of different scenarios. And so I knew what that felt like. I knew what that kind of team and getting everybody rowing in the same direction and motivating people and creating that vision felt like. And so I can navigate pretty quickly back to it. And so if you look at it, like a real tangible example would be, Jim was our CEO for many years, and Jim just kind of slowly started handing the business over to me as he was, kind of seasoning out, as I like to say, and I was coming into the business. And so it was a very natural thing, and the business was changing a lot. We were changing from more of a traditional business to a digital business. And so it just always made sense. Like, I don't think anybody who was part of, that 5 or 10 year period would ever go, oh yeah, it wasn't clear what was going to happen. And I think where Jim and I had an amazing relationship was I knew what his strengths were and I learned from them, and he knew what my strengths were and he appreciated those, and he set me up for extraordinary success. And he would point out things that I wasn't good at and give me feedback. And as a matter of fact, just the other day I was going through some files I've got, and he would write me letters of like
handwritten notes,
like for handwritten notes, and they weren't formal reviews or anything. As a matter of fact, I'd never gotten a review from him. We went out and got a beer one day, and he handed me the blank review document, and he said, "How do you think you're doing?" But he would write me these letters and talk to me about what he saw and how I could do things differently, and it was hugely impactful. So you'd ask a question earlier about mentors. Finding somebody who will invest that kind of time in you, that'll be the greatest gift your career ever gets. And I've had 3 or 4 of those people in my career. I started early with a lady named Brenda Cook. She would invest extraordinary amount of time in making me a better person. A guy named Don Perdue who would do the same thing. I had different people in my career that have taken the time to invest in me and make me a better person. And that allowed me to continue to push my skills to the point when I found out, being a CEO or an executive leader is something I'm way better at than being a manager. I'm a terrible manager, but I feel like I'm a pretty good leader.
Wow, I like that. So terrible manager. Again,
Terrible.
most people think but as a young person looking in says, well, it's the progression, stair step. I've got to be a great manager, then I've got to be great this and great that. And to that point, some people are great managers and are not great leaders. And there are some folks that are amazing leaders that just simply aren't really designed to be at a day-to-day. And you can't suck at either one, But there is something about that. When did that click for you, that you knew that leadership was something that not only you were good at, but kind of that you were destined to be in that role in this latter part of your career?
Yeah. So 7 years ago or so, was given a not so subtle hint that it was my first year or two of being CEO, and folks said, you got to work on, just some of your skills and kind of think about things. And I was doing some things very, very wrong at the time. And so I got an executive coach. He was extraordinarily helpful with me. And he comes in one day to one of our sessions and he slides a book across the table. What got you here won't get you there, which is, it's a really good book to kind of show this example of, and the quintessential example in the book is like people who are really good salespeople don't always make good sales managers. And they may have to say, well, you're really good at selling, but you got to develop a whole different set of skills to be good at the next thing. I was a terrible manager. I've always been a terrible manager. And luckily I had people that allowed me to be a not great manager, and they saw my potential in eventually being a leader and let me skip over that. But Terry Warren slides this book over. He says, "Go read this." And so I go read it. And we have a couple more sessions. And then one day he comes in and he says, "Isaac, I don't think you know what your job description is." And I said, "That's totally fair, because in 20 years of business, nobody's ever given me one. I'd literally just been hired for jobs, and I'd never applied to anything before." And he says, "You need to go write your job description." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You go figure that out." And so I went out in the woods for a weekend and rented a cabin for Friday and Saturday, and I committed myself, and I said, I'm going to go write my job description as a CEO, and what's that going to say? And I tell you, Rick, Friday night was rough. Saturday was rough. I was like going through all this paper, taking walks. Like, what does it mean for me to be CEO? What does that mean for me to lead people? And I woke up on the Sunday morning. I was kind of nervous going to bed that night because I'm like, I'm going to totally fail at this. And I woke up very early and I wrote down 3 things. And I look at these 3 things every single day. It's right people, right resources, right decisions. What I realized was my abilities were lined up with making sure that we had the right people in whatever management roles we needed. So looking at that talent, helping them evaluate, mentoring them. That's number 1. Right people, right resources. Give people what they need to be successful. As a leader, you need to be giving them things like budget and resource, but also vision. Show them where the company's trying to go, show them where they need to take their business, and then help them make the right decisions. Never make the right decisions for them, but help those managers make decisions. Let them come to you and say, I just want to vent. I got to figure this thing out. And you don't even have to talk back. I just want to listen, or help me work through this problem. Never make the decision for them, but help them make that decision. So I wrote that down. And for whatever reason, that's that lightning moment for me where I realized, Isaac, you don't have to be good at all these other things. If you can nail these 3 things as a leader, you can be a really good leader. And I believe that's true. And so that's been my kind of guiding principle for, the better part of a decade now. Wow.
Let's camp on that for a second. First of all, do you still have that sheet of paper?
I don't have the paper, but I have
Isaac.
I know. So it was I was told you I was running out of paper. So it was like I had written it down, I think, on one of the, because this was kind of a low rent cabin. There was this little piece of paper that by the bedstand, I'd gone through all that. I had I think some leftover paper from a conference, and I wrote it on the bottom of an unused piece of the daily itinerary. And I think that's where I wrote it first. And then I put it in my computer and I thought about it, and but it's plastered all over my life. I just don't have that original piece of paper.
So that piece of paper today on eBay would be worth bank.
Bank, yeah, it'd be worth less than the shipping probably, Rick.
Oh my goodness, that's so good. So that truly is one of those defining moments of your life, and I love the fact that you didn't have a job description, but when you wrote those 3 things out. Was that the point where we talked about push and go, where you're like, okay, I got it. I can really lean in. I know I can go do this.
That's the point where everything came together for me, because so my struggles up until that in my life had been, I do have some abilities to do some tactical task things. I'm pretty good at sales. I can think of product development. Like I'm kind of what do they call it? Like a polymath. Like I know, like I got a little bit of knowledge about a lot of different things. So a lot of my career was about being kind of good at those things and just through muscle kind of being able to complete a lot of different tasks. And where I was at in my life, and the reason Terry slid that book over across the desk was he was trying to say, you need a new set of skills. You need to look at your capabilities in a different way and forget that you're kind of good at sales or kind of good at this. You as a leader have to be good at making your people good at what they're supposed to be doing. So there is no more defining moment for me than writing those three things down and realizing how much they spoke to me internally and how much of a guiding principle they become for the rest of my life.
Wow. So when I look at that, and how old were you then? About what age?
Oh, that was probably about 8 years ago. So I was very young, 34.
Okay. So what I think is really cool about it is that
something like that.
Vandy, great school. You go out, you get real world experience. You go back, get an MBA, fantastic MBA program. So you're highly educated, a ton of experience. But it took a trip to the woods and a mentor asking you to read a book before you finally reflected enough to say, wow, the weekend, the cabin, the book, writing down those three things and leaning in was the culmination of experience, wisdom, education, all kind of coming together. And not that you couldn't have garnered that when you were 25 or 30, but think of how much more it meant with the education and the experience underneath your belt. So when you read those words, they meant something. Because 23-year-old you would get that, but it meant so much more at that point in your career.
Yeah, I mean, I think the timing lined up. Rick, I believe timing's a big thing. So we had gone through a point in the organization where we had some of the wrong people. Some of those people we brought in the organization because I didn't trust my instincts, or I've also developed some. I'm a big fan of these kind of little tropes and frameworks and things, and so I'd kind of said, "Ooh, I got my fingers burned by doing the wrong thing on hiring," and so that was informing that piece. I'd spent a lot of time with this executive coach listening to how people want to get managed and how they want to be led and what they need from their leader. And so that kind of informed part of it. And one of the pieces of feedback I kept getting from the managers around me that reported to me at the time was, I try and do it all myself. I told you, I love fixing problems. Like that's why I love business. Right. And so I always try to solve all the problems myself. And they were giving me this very direct feedback through my executive coach. And they were saying, damn it, stop solving all the problems. Teach me how to solve it. Teach me how to do this. And so the timing was really good. Having an executive coach who could, be this objective third party and look at me and go, you need to wake up because the answer's right in front of you. Just, you need to put it together. And he did it in just a kind of a way that really worked for me. And it clicked. It was the moment where everything made sense. Everything made sense.
Not everyone can have an executive coach, but everyone can have a mentor or someone that pours into them. So speak a little bit about kind of the role the executive coach played, and do you still spend time with him today?
Not with him, no. Terry and I spent a couple of years together.
Okay.
I have a different executive coach today working on kind of a different set of skills. But yeah, Terry and I worked together for about 2 years. Okay.
But as someone's listening and said, yeah, I can't have an executive coach, but whether it be a mentor or sometimes it's hard for a friend to do this, but a person that you can trust, what are the types of things that someone should be looking for in a person that can pour into them, even though they may not have the title of executive coach, but anyone that had that was listening to this would say, it's not my friend, not my spouse, not my roommate, but I need a person. What are some characteristics or kind of things you would be looking for if you were going to suggest for someone else to have someone pour into them?
Yeah, so
because it's a little different than a mentor. The reason I say it's a little bit different than a mentor.
Yeah, and it's definitely different than a coach, because a coach is getting paid to give you feedback. And I've had some good coaches, and I've had some coaches that were okay. And so when I look at those mentors that aren't the executive coaches, and they're maybe not a boss, but somebody who you can rely on to give you feedback, it's I think it's got to be somebody that believes in you and wants you to be better and wants to see you grow. And that's a really hard thing to understand out of somebody but I think you do kind of know it when you see it. Like, I'll use here my relationship, Rick. Like, you and I don't talk every day, but I'm confident that if I called you up one day and said, Rick, I need you to just listen to what I'm dealing with, some business problem, some whatever, and just tell me the truth. What am I like? Am I way off base here? I think you would do that. And I think if you can find people who have enough trust in your relationship that they can just give you the truth and tell you straight, and nobody's going to get their feelings hurt, or they're not worried about how it's going to sound or land. If you can find those really authentic people, and sometimes those people really piss you off. Those people are people who tell you the truth when you didn't ask for it, but they become people, if you can learn to respect that, they become people that can actually help you grow. So I'll give you another example, and she would get mad at me for saying this, but I'll say it anyway. Kathy Doyle is one of those people. So I think you know Kathy.
Yeah, I know Kathy.
Kathy's somebody I've known since I joined the industry. She's one of the first clients I ever talked to. And Kathy will shoot you straight on just about anything. And man, that'll piss you off sometimes, because sometimes you're like, I did not ask you for the truth. But what you come to respect about somebody like Kathy is that truth is what you need to hear. And so there's a lot of times where, when I was running 2020 or doing different things, I'd call up Kathy about some random thing that we were doing in the business. And I'd be like, Kathy, what do you think about that? And she'd be like, well, I think that's a terrible idea, and here's why. And you know what? She was right a lot of the times. And I would say probably most of the time. And so those people that like, don't surround yourself or look for guidance from people who want to tell you everything's great, everything's awesome. You got to find those people who, really believe in you enough and want you to grow enough that they'll tell you the truth, even if it hurts to hear it. And I've been fortunate enough that most of the leaders that I've surrounded myself with, they'll be honest with me about that. And after most like executive meetings or whatever that I lead, I'll turn around to folks and I'll say, well, how'd that go? And sometimes they'll say, we didn't really get much done. And I want that kind of honesty. So Rick, if you can find somebody who can be brutally honest with you, even though that's not what you want to hear, oh, you're doing great, you're doing amazing. Yeah. And people will tell you that, but you got to find those people who will actually invest the time to actually tell you what's really going on.
Yeah, I use an analogy like this. There's a parable in Scripture that talks about planters and sowers, and there's this concept if you have any Enneagram background, is that you have to fertilize, but you also have to kind of weed things. If you've planted anything like even a tomato plant in the pot behind on your deck. But if you talk to someone that's a farmer, they would say, hey, too much of a good thing, too much of fertilizer will burn the plant.
That's right. Yeah.
And if you're not careful,
nothing grows in fertilizer. Nothing grows.
And if you're not careful and you use a chainsaw to weed eat, you just destroy the plant. And so what I tell people about mentorship is that too much of a yes person is as bad of a person that's telling you no, 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 no. So there is that interesting balance. And so even if you can't have that perfection in one person, you need a person that can encourage you, but you got to be careful too much. You got to be a person that's going to push on you the other side. But let's transition a little bit. So here's, Isaac, he's the man, he's running these companies, but not all of us can run a company forever. And then we get part of other organizations. You've had a transition over the last few years from running company A and then company B, and now you're part of a larger organization. Tell us a little bit about that transition. What does that look like for you today?
Yeah. So when you get into larger organizations, the impact you have is different. So I'm now Chief Strategy Officer. And so what I work on a lot is kind of where are we trying to lead the business to over the next 3 to 5 year period.
Yeah. And I'll pause for a second. So you went from CEO company A, CEO company B, you were acquired. Now you're still a C-level person, but it's not the number one guy, but you're still significant influence, but it's a different role.
Different role. Yeah. Different role. So when you've got a really broad organization, what you've got to think about is how do we create a strategy that's really durable that you can break down? We've got 6 different kind of pillars that we look at, that these are the things that are going to drive our business over the next several years. Look, we got to do the blocking and tackling stuff today, but how are we going to be transforming this business? And so how do you structure those things? How do you measure those things? How do you tell the story to the organization about why those things are important? Because some of those things are going to sound like things that those people are uncomfortable with. Like, what do you mean I've got to be able to do that in 3 years? And so how do you get them along? So I find the skills of a CEO are pretty perfectly tailored to a chief strategy officer, because You're not focusing necessarily on the right people as much, but the resource they need is the vision, the strategy, the guidance. Like, where are we trying to go? What does success even mean? How do you measure that? How will I know if I'm doing a good job? And then I do a lot of the latter part, which is helping them make the right decisions, which is, okay, which of these things is on strategy and which one of these is off? What direction should we go, left or right? And I do my best to try and bring a 3 to 5 year perspective on it, and not a short-term perspective. So it's funny, it's using a lot of the same skills, just in a different capacity.
Yeah, what I love about that for you is that it's uniquely using the skills you possess of that leadership arm. Because again, as a strategy guy, you're not coming in trying to manage a bunch of processes. You're still leading, which is fantastic. So if you're in the research insights world, everyone would know who Isaac is, and they would get Schlesinger as kind of the company. But if folks were trying to get a cup of coffee with you today, I said, man, I love this Isaac. I wanted a cup of coffee. If they wanted to find you or contact you or engage your company, how would they engage you, and how would they know more about the company you work with today?
So the first thing I'll tell you is I think LinkedIn is one of the best things ever created. And I do a lot of communication on there, and I have people every single day that are reaching me on LinkedIn and asking for that virtual cup of coffee. Hey, can we talk about a job? And so I love and welcome that. And as long as you're not trying to sell me, IT destruction software or some random thing, if it's related to the research industry, unless I missed the message, I take every one of those calls.
Okay.
and usually turn them into a 30 or 45 minute long phone call. So the way to learn about our business is, we're a very large, diversified global research partner for a lot of agencies, a lot of brands. Our website's a pretty good place to learn about that. I would tell you just to pick up the phone and call me. I love talking about this stuff. So, if you've got enough interest to say, what is the Schlesinger Group and what do they do and how could they help us further our insights practice? How could they bring some of their tools to the table? I would tell you I'm a pretty good place to start, because I'll pick up the phone and talk to anybody for 15 minutes.
That's fantastic. Well, that's one, again, we talked about the networking part and the engagement. I so appreciate that, from your perspective. When I was first coming into the industry and engaging, again, go talk to Isaac, and you've done a fantastic job mentoring me along, helping me out. So I appreciate that. And for those that are thinking about the research world, or even the strategy, kind of that tech CEO side of things, and there's nothing better than a virtual cup of coffee with Mr. Isaac Rogers. Isaac, man, thank you so much for today.
Rick, anytime. Pleasure to be here.
Appreciate it, man. We'll see you at an event soon. Thanks for listening to Push Go, a podcast highlighting the defining moments that impact how we live and work. It was fantastic having Isaac on the show. If you like what you heard, you can find more stories just like this one on listen.plumshop.com. And hey, we wouldn't be mad if you left us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, we have new episodes every Wednesday, and if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. Now, quick PS for you. We have a Plum Spotlight that we bring you each week. It's a segment where I give you a sneak peek at what's happening at Plum. Now, Plum recently published a product launch ebook that's filled with all the industry tips and retail solutions that you'll need to nail a product launch. You can find it at blog.plumshop.com. And if a product catches your eye, you can use the code PUSHGO, that's PUSHGO, for $100 off your first plumshop.com purchase. Happy shopping.